Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished panelists, esteemed audience. I am Major General Retired Leonardo DINU, member of the Scientific Council of New Strategy Center, and I am extremely thrilled and honored to chair the 16th panel of the 7th edition of the Black Sea and Balkan Security Forum. One front, one vision, one strategy is the motto of this last panel, and together with our distinguished panelists, an arena for in-depth military high-level dialogue will be provided regarding NATO's deterrence and defense policy against Russian aggression, especially on the eastern flank. Since Russia's Crimea annexation on the eastern Ukraine invasion in 2014, important NATO initiatives and decisions have been taken in terms of defense and deterrence, reflected in the Allied Agreed Readiness Action Plan in 2014 and continued at the Warsaw Summit 2016, when it was decided, among others, the creation of a rotational forward presence on the eastern flank. In recent years, allies have enhanced NATO's forward presence by establishing multinational battle groups in Bulgaria, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, and Slovakia. They have also sent more ships, planes, and troops to NATO's eastern flank, from the Baltic Sea in the north to the Black Sea in the south. These actions demonstrate allied solidarity, determination, and ability to defend alliance territory and populations. At the Madrid summit in June 2022, NATO leaders made decisions to significantly strengthen the alliance deterrence and defense posture. Also, they agreed to enhance the multinational battle groups from battalions up to brigade size where and when required. Yet, resetting NATO's defense and deterrence posture is not simply a military strategic matter. It is, above all, a political one requiring unity and solidarity. I conclude my introductory remarks recalling one of the basic principles taken from the North Atlantic Treaty. They are resolved to unite their efforts for collective defense and for the preservation of peace and security. In order to better understand if deterrence and defense, together with resilience, cooperation, determination, solidarity, and unity, represent all in one the key response to Russia's conventional and hybrid threats to NATO and to its partner states, I have the great honor to introduce our distinguished speakers. General Daniel Petrescu, Chief of Defense, Romanian Chief of Defense. Thank you, sir, being here once again and being a permanent to our forums, Black Sea and the Balkan Security Forums. Lieutenant General Stefan KELSEY, Deputy Commander of the NATO Joint Force Command from Canada. Thank you, sir, being here. Lieutenant General Karel ŘEHKA, Chief of Defense, Czech Republic. Thank you, sir. And via VTC, we have Deputy Chief of Georgian Defense Forces, Brigadier General Irakli Cicinațe. Do you hear us, sir?
Yes, Mr. Dino, I hear you very well.
Thank you, Irakli. So, in order not to lose time, I would ask General Petrescu to start his remarks, and I would like to focus on how has Romania military adapted from strategic point of view to the war at its border and according to the latest NATO documents. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Leo. Good afternoon. I will answer your question, but let me start saying it's a pleasure to be here and to congratulate New Strategy Center for organizing this event. This is the 17th iteration of the event, as the seven, okay, seven. as far as I know, and I think it's the most insightful. I looked at the program, and I looked at the panelists, I looked at the issues that have been discussed. I think I should congratulate you for your patience to be here in the second to the last panel of the conference. I see many uniforms. This means they had to be here since we are here in the panel, but I see also many civilian clothes, so this is encouraging for your interest regarding what we deal with, one front, one vision, one strategy regarding NATO Eastern flank. It's also a pleasure to be together with representatives from Naples, with Irakli. My greetings to you and to your Chod. And it looks like with me, Naples and Irakli, we seem to be a little bit biased towards south and east. So this is why we also asked Karel to be present. He's like a pivot between what is going on in the southeast and what is going on in the northeast. So Karel, thank you very much for being here. I think I owe you my participation in one of your conferences, and I will keep my word for that. You know, this conference comes at a time with many events that help us think and prepare for the Vilnius summit. About 2 weeks ago, I had the privilege to participate in the meetings of the NATO Military Committee in the Chiefs of Defense session, and then European Union Military Committee. I just returned today from the conference organized by the Chief of Defense in the Balkans. Stephen was with me there also. In a couple of weeks, we will have in Bucharest the Central Europe Chief of Defense Conference, and then in July, the NATO summit in Vilnius. I look at what we have to discuss, and it's pretty much focused on NATO's deterrence and defense policy. But I think it's much more than this, because the way we reply to the conflict in Ukraine was not only NATO, was also EU, all other type of forms of cooperation. And I think if we want to have an answer and we want to have the result we want to have in Ukraine, is not only NATO, is all this cooperation of all international organizations, our strategic partners, also very, very important. We are talking about a new era of collective defense. And when you asked me how we adapted to that, I think what Romanian armed forces are doing, this is very well synchronized with what is going on in NATO. And I think tonight we should talk about strength and we should talk about unity, because this is what characterized our answer to the conflict in Ukraine. And probably we got to a point when the national plans are the best synchronized with NATO plans, that NATO plans are very advanced, and I hope we will see the results not only in planning, but also in the way we develop forces, we attach forces to the plans, we create the necessary command and control structures, and we delegate the necessary authorities to the commanders in order to be able to execute this plan. To answer your question, I would refer to three things: where we are, where we want to go, and what we need to do in order to get where we want to get. First, where we are. We are in the 15th, almost 16th month of a conflict, which is very close to our border. It's very close to our borders, and also it's influencing not only in the military domain, but in all the other domains, diplomatic, informational, economic. And so the consequences of this conflict on the Euro-Atlantic security are huge. The area of the Black Sea is the joint operation area for the Russian military. Here we can see every day missiles being launched towards Ukraine. So this area and because we speak not only about Black Sea, but we also speak about the Balkans, these areas have become like areas of permanent instability. And the conflict in Ukraine also has potential to fuel other frozen conflicts in this area, and we need to be very careful regarding that. We don't have in sight perspectives regarding the war termination, but we look very careful on what is going on there, and we have some lessons identified and lessons learned, and I think these lessons identified and learned are going to influence the way we plan and the way we develop our capabilities. And I would mention some, because it's important to keep these lessons in mind when we prepare our planning. In terms of preparation for defense, preparation of the territory is very important, and having the necessary stocks, this is also very important. In terms of conducting your defense, because we are a defensive organization and we focus mainly on defending every inch of the NATO territory. Robust ISR is very much necessary. Survivability of strategic important system like command and control nodes, air defense, long-range precision fire capabilities, and so on. Redundant command and control. The capacity to protect and keep functional the national defense industry. Without the support of the national defense industry, when a conflict becomes a prolonged conflict, it becomes also a conflict of logistics, and the capacity to resupply the troops is very much important. To protect and keep functional the critical infrastructure, and protect and keep functional the supply routes. So these are things that are very important when we develop our plans, and we keep in mind when we develop the capabilities in Romanian Armed Forces too. Where we want to go, and here I will offer a military perspective. We want to deter Russia, and it seems to me that we have been successfully so far. There was not a threat to a NATO country or to a NATO territory. And we also want to be capable to defend every inch of our territory from the military point of view. But I think it's more than defending every inch, it's more than geography. I think it's more about defending our values, because our values are at stake here, and we cannot accept a world when the right of the force is used to change borders. We cannot accept this type of world. Okay, how we get there? I spoke about plans, I spoke about assigned forces, I spoke about the command and control and authorities. The plans we are developing right now, it's influencing the way we will develop our forces. And it will be very well synchronized what we need to attach to the plan, to apportion to the plan as forces, and what we develop inside. And this is linked with our not only defense planning process, it's linked with the procurement in the Romanian Armed Forces. We are very lucky with the political decision to get 2.5% for defense starting this year, and we are paying very much attention to use this 2.5% for good result. And for this, we are interested in some procurement program like air defense, manpads, short-range air defense, very short-range air defense, mechanized infantry, UAS, electronic warfare, naval capabilities. We've just approved in the parliament an important package for naval capabilities because Black Sea, it's important, and we need capabilities for the riverine countries as long as other capabilities is very difficult to get into the Black Sea. So we are increasing military capabilities. We are building mobility capacity, and we are building host nation support. It's responsibility of Romania as a country situated as the eastern flank to develop the capacity to support NATO reinforcement. We also continue and strengthen the commitment in theaters of operation. We are one of the most important commitments in Bosnia because we know the security of the Balkans is very much linked with the security of the Black Sea. So we developed this. We based our security on the NATO-EU strategic partnership with the US, but also on our own capabilities. And I think we can do it together, we can transform together, and we can achieve our objectives together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir, for your insight about Romanian defense staff and Romanian armed forces willing to improve the defense capabilities. I'd like to, I hope I'll not be wrong, but I would like to sum up what you said in one sentence. I mean, resilience, which is the first line of the defense. All this means resilience. Am I wrong?
I didn't say the word resilience, but I agree with you.
Thank you, sir. So now, because we want to have a larger view on the southeastern flank, we turn to Lieutenant General Stefan Kessler, which is the Deputy Commander of NATO Joint Force Command Naples. And I have the same question from Naples' point of view, from the GFC Naples point of view. What do you think what was done well, what is needed to be done in the future?
Okay, thank you very much, and let me also say thank you to our hosts and the New Strategy Center for enabling this discussion. Conscious that it is close second last, I think General PETRESCU said. It's a great chance to listen, to learn, to think, maybe reevaluate or check some assumptions, but above all, contribute. Understanding the environment is to understand the opportunity. What I will try to do to answer your question is go, just as General PETRESCU has, allude to the strategy and the vision, but speak to the path to action. It should be obvious to all that I am not from Brussels. I am not from Mons, but where I am from is Bella Napoli, one of many of the operational level commands, and I make that distinction only to underscore the focus of my contribution. And like the maritime components of NATO, the air, land, special forces, enabling command, and the other joint commands, our position, our obligation is to convert strategy and vision into action. And we do this, we can only do this with the nations. And in our case, it's 13 very talented nations that we work with, as was alluded to in the recent period, last 10 months, focused on the regional plans that covered a lot of ground. But it includes partners, and it includes every nation of NATO and the EU, all with unity of purpose to greater understanding. So I emphasize the role that I play, not to diminish strategy or the ideas, but rather to underscore perhaps the path that needs to, and the work that still needs to be done. And so I'll allude to, and I think it's the theme of the panel, vision and strategy and one purpose. The NATO strategic concept, which was one of the more significant documents to be published recently, is significant for the threats that it did underscore, but also remind in terms of the three core missions of NATO. But that strategy, as good as it is not deterrence in of itself. And so what we focus on at the operational level is building upon the strategy that does represent unity, a theme that was previously mentioned. But unity, if we accept that that is perhaps our greatest strength as an alliance, it's also equally what the Russians perhaps misunderstood or miscalculated. But that deterrence is the result of strategy, but deterrence in of itself is not just about capability. It's not just about readiness, posture. and it's not just about demonstration or acts. It's actually about will, and that's a theme that I think General PETRESCU alluded to. And so with that, here we are gathered at a time of heightened uncertainty and increased threat, and so much the better to be discussing this, and I'm honored to be here with the CHODs represented here. As would you expect of me, I'll be specific in concrete in terms of what needs to be done. Foremost, it was alluded to the significant transformation that's happening across ACO. Plans, forces, command and control, and perhaps authorities. But the plans itself has been a significant event for every nation, the 13 nations in particular, and the partners of this region. And nobody knows better, General PETRESCU just alluded to it, the load and the transformation implications that not just the substance of what we're exploring, but the approach and the time, the sense of urgency that has been accelerated as a result of this ever-evolving circumstance in Ukraine. And the nations understand this better than any, that there's a lot happening at the same time. And so it's not actually the plan. We were discussing this over lunch. It's not the plan in of itself, it's not the document. It's the interaction, it's using the national plans to build upon the requirements with compelling logic and coherence through what NATO can bring to make real this concept of deterrence. And it's a significant load. Now, in Naples, there's a lot going on we recognize from the nations, and in order to provide some coherence and push away all of the other urgent or immediate activity to get to the urgent, there's a framework that Admiral Munch uses to give us focus, but also perhaps make the complex a little more simple and the simple compelling. The policy or the strategy is to deter and defend. Our obligation together is not just about any one capability, it's about warfighting advantage. The act, the perception that will deter or change the calculus of the adversary, of Russia. And to build warfighting advantage, it requires interoperability, and interoperability demands trust. And trust as the foundation is a theme, it was just mentioned again, but it's what drives everything we do, including activities like this, where we listen, we think, we learn, and we adapt. But you can't surge trust. This is something that's nurtured, this is something that's built through relationships over time, and that's what provides unity of purpose. The trust as the foundation is the key to interoperability. Interoperability is technical. This week we have representatives from Romania, Bulgaria, Italy, France, and many nations of the South in Naples working on technical interoperability, the mission network that'll be used for the tailored forward presence. Technical interoperability is not the only interoperability. It's about doctrine, it's about process. I'm reminding all of us what you already know, I can tell. But it's also a human interaction. But through interoperability as a foundation, that's the key to warfighting advantage. And now I'm getting to the point about where we need to focus on. Warfighting advantage, we do have it across NATO, individual nations, but we're also absent in many key areas. And that's where we need to focus. If you were to ask the 4 key battles to complement all of the plans-driven requirements for forces and command and control, the 4 key battles include fires, command and control, the information environment, and enablement. And while I'd be happy to explore some of those 4 key areas, battles where we need to expand, maybe just a comment about enablement. And it's not that we don't have it in complete sense. We understand the demand, but we're not prepared. And so the conversations that are playing out right now, this week in Mons, are about enablement. robust, resilient, redundant, but also rehearsed. And those are going to be the key to not the hard or the challenges of generating more forces, tier 1 or tier 2. It's about sustaining them, reinforcing them, surging them. And that capability is what offers strength, and that strength is what is the deterrence. I'd be happy to talk about that in greater detail, but that's the Naples perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your overview, and especially for what you mentioned about what we need to do in terms of to strengthen our defense and deterrence posture, and the 4 fields you already mentioned. And I would like to underline one thing that we talked also last time. It's interoperability and understanding. Interoperability means not only systems, also between the people, armies, and services altogether. Now we'll go towards northeastern flank, and I'm very happy to see here Lieutenant General Karel ŘEHKA, and I have the same question for you from northeastern flank, and from the Czech perspective. How do you see the things?
Okay, thank you very much. So first, I also want to thank the organizers for inviting me. It's a pleasure and privilege to be here with such a distinguished speakers, and also thanks to Daniel. And I will make sure that you keep the word and come for the beer to Czech Republic. So, okay, Czech Republic is actually, it's not. Yes, our focus usually is very much on the Slovakia, where we are the leading nation in the battle group, the multinational battle group, also to the Poland to north and to Baltic states. So we have people in this HQ of the multinational division Northeast, which I used to be the deputy commander. We also have forces in Slovakia, in Latvia, and Lithuania. So it looks like we are the Northeast. Actually, we're not. Because I think the biggest role of the Czech Republic in the execution of the plans is also the host nation support and the enablement and providing this very important transit corridor. And actually it goes both ways. It goes northeast and southeast. So even here we have a role in supporting basically this wing, this place. So what I think about things is, I think the war in Ukraine changed everything. I think there are things which we will see in the future and we may not realize yet. It will have an impact on the security infrastructure and the roles of some organizations. I think we should be proud of what how we put together. And I think we not only surprised Putin, but we may be a little bit surprised ourselves in a positive sense. Because the unity, not only in NATO, but in EU was great, and it was mentioned here a couple of times that the unity really is the key. And it is our strategic center of gravity. And I'm also proud of my country. But there will be huge impacts also on other areas, like what it will do in the area of proliferation of the nuclear weapons, for example. And other areas. The Russia is, I think, finally, maybe it's obvious in Romania, but it's not so obvious in other parts of the Europe, and that Russia is a clear and direct threat. And I can tell you that when I said this publicly a few years ago, I had a little advice usually afterwards, like that I should be more careful. Our national security strategy was reviewed after Crimea. It didn't contain word Russia, not once. So now with this, reflecting this into the new strategic concept, but also the national strategic documents, I think we are much more clear on what Russia is. So that's one outcome, and it's a positive outcome. I think that Russia will remain to be a direct threat to us, regardless the end of the war. It is important to support the Ukrainians, not only for the moral reasons, but also because it has a direct impact on our security and defense, and the outcome of the war will shape our security. And I believe that regardless what is the end of the war, the Russia will be more hostile and less predictable towards us. So I think we need to take this threat seriously. However, we shouldn't only focus on what's going to be the outcome for Russia. I think we should also more think about the Ukraine itself, because it's a huge, it's the second largest country in Europe with a huge potential. It's a country which treasures the same values. It wasn't always like that. We shouldn't take it as for granted. And I think the Ukrainian nation is what they do, and they also fight for us. It's very admirable. But I think at some point there will necessarily be frustrations, and I think we need to make sure that we show them the light in the tunnel and the clear path and the future. And I think this is not being discussed enough. There's a lot of discussions about the full membership offer in summit or not. I'm not a politician. I won't try to judge, whether it will happen or not. But even if it's not full membership soon, I think we need to work on presenting Ukrainians some clear future. But also, this will have an impact on the military cooperation and how we help to develop Ukrainian military in future. Because right now we're improvising. We're doing as fast, as much as we can, but over the long term we'll have to change the approach to make it more sustainable. Also, we need to still watch the other areas, even though our focus, I think, should be here in this area of this eastern flank. But obviously we have to look at this Indo-Pacific and other regions, because whatever happens there will have impact on us here. For me, as a soldier, the biggest change of the basic paradigm in this new security situation, at least from my perspective back at home, is that we admit ourselves that the big war may happen in Europe, and then we need to be preparing for it. It sounds very natural, but actually it wasn't. So this, at least in my country, this is a big shift of mindset. We didn't admit this in strategic documents. We were saying that the big war cannot happen in Europe. If it happens, we will know in advance, many, many years, and we were not preparing for it. And I think this is the biggest change. And it has a huge impact on military, but also on the whole society, because preparing for the big war, and what I mean by big war is a high-intensity, large-scale conflict which may last for some time, and that requires completely different military than what we were building for the expeditionary operations. And it requires other things like supplies, industrial capacity, enablement, preparation of the territory, and other many things. Obviously, the NATO is reacting by strengthening the eastern flank, and the new plans were mentioned here. And I think it's a huge achievement. And I believe, just like I think we both believe that, all of us here, is that it's very important that those plans are going forward, and hopefully they will be approved in the next NATO summit. Regardless, minor concerns some of us may have, but I think it's important that we go forward with those plans, a new force model, and the strengthening of the eastern flank. I also want to say that I think you cannot really split the importance of the eastern flank. It's not about, whether it's northeast or southeast. It's all important. It's all one. And if we have a serious conflict with Russia, it won't happen. It will not happen in one area only. So we need to really balance our effort and focus everywhere, including Black Sea region, especially with this huge escalatory potential which we have right now in the Black Sea region. Then also, other thing I want to mention is, it is also, I think, one of the observations from this war is that the over-relying on the deterrence by punishment didn't really work. So I think we need to more lean towards the deterrence by denial, and that means that we actually build the real forces. And the deterrence is about having a capability and capacity, having the will to use it, and also be able to communicate it clearly to the potential adversary. And I think this is what is going on right now with those new plans and new force model, and I think that's important. And actually, I believe that Russia is on the trajectory to conflict with alliance. I'm not saying they're planning for it. I don't say they want it. We don't want it. They don't want it. But that doesn't mean it cannot happen. By what they do, by what is happening in Russia, by the behavior, and by the rhetoric they have, I think they are on that trajectory. And I think we should do our best to prevent this. And the only way to prevent it is this deterrence by denial, is to show them that there's no chance, don't even try it. So I think that's why it's also all that important. That has a major impact in our country as well. So we are reviewing all our documents from national security strategy, defense strategy, concept for development of the armed forces, everything basically. And we may discuss it later if you're interested. And that also has an impact on my priorities as a CHOT. And just before I finish, maybe a few observations on the Ukraine war. There's a number of, I'm careful to call it lessons because it's very early and we don't know a lot of stuff, and the conflict is still going on. There's clearly a number of observations. And what I take from it and as strategic level observations, operational or tactical level observations, but the nationwide strategic observations I have is the importance of the resilience of the whole society and determination to defend itself. Because if Ukrainians collapsed in few weeks in the beginning, there would be no support. We would have no one to support. And we can support them because they show this resilience. And I think regardless what alliances or coalitions you have, this is important that you build it in your own nation. So that's a takeaway for me. Also, it shows the importance of strategic communication because they show their resilience, determination, but they were also able to communicate it to the Western societies. So the people pushed on the political leaders to provide the support to Ukraine. It just didn't happen automatically. You know, it was a huge achievement of Ukrainians that they got the support. Also, another observation is that if you want to prepare for the large-scale conflict, it's not military only, it's the whole state effort and it's the whole of society effort. And clearly, if you wargame any of your national defense plans, you will find out very soon that it's really, you need to cooperate like the whole society. And also, one of the things it shows me is the importance of our NATO membership and how lucky we are, we in NATO, and we must do our best to keep NATO functioning. And also on this military side, what it tells me is that there's no safe rear area. So it is especially, I don't have to explain it to Romanians or Baltic states because you are a neighbor to the threat and you know this very well. But sometimes in nations like us, Czech Republic, we're not too far away, but we are not directly neighboring the threat, and we are surrounded by friendly nations. And sometimes it creates the false sense of security. And sometimes you need to explain people that it's false sense, because if things happen here or anywhere else on the eastern flank, we will be part of it from the first minute. And that brings me to the last point. When I think about all of that, from my national perspective as a CHOT, my real strategic center of gravity and the precondition for any success is the support of the society. So it is very, very, very important to be able to explain to the majority of the society, maybe not to everyone, but to the sufficient portion of the society, what the threats are, to make them understand, and to make them understand that they need to push on their political leaders and ask for the sufficient level of security and defense from them. And that's very important because we are in democracy, the governments are changing, and if you want to do this long term, you need to make sure that the society understands the threats and request to have the sufficient level of defense. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I cannot agree more with what you said, that Russia, it's emanating threats. So it's conducting a war against Ukraine, but also emanating threats towards NATO or European Union and Euro-Atlantic community, and have to be prepared. And you mentioned very well that every nation, first of all, must be prepared to tackle these threats, but eventually to be prepared for a large war. That we forgot this after Second World War, for so many years of peace, that and we couldn't imagine that this thing can happen now in 21st century. Thank you very much, and I would like now to go across the Black Sea and to talk to Deputy Chief of Defense of Georgian Armed Forces. Georgia, it's under direct threat from Russia. They have a common border with Russia. They have two frozen conflicts in Georgia, and they feel much better than us the burden of security and defense in the country. So, General Irakli, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. And dear generals, yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to have this opportunity and participate in this very important, useful event. And I'd like to express my gratitude towards New Strategy Center for this conference. First of all, let me express my deepest gratitude toward General PETRESCU, the Chief of Defense Staff of Naples, Romania, for the conference meeting and a speech opportunity. Events like this on current security environment, areas of cooperation are extremely important in these difficult times when the Russian Federation, by aggressive actions in Ukraine, completely violates fundamental principles and norms of international law, undermining the global stability. Russian Federation's military aggression against Georgia in 2008 became the first full-scale military intervention in sovereign country, followed by the occupation of regions of Georgia, and Sino Valley region of Turkey. Later, we witnessed the annexation of Crimea. Threats coming from Russia have not decreased in recent years. Threats of renewed aggression against Georgia still. In this recent period, we see an increased intensification of disinformation and psyops against my country, which engulfs increased volume of discrediting statements and messages. Simultaneously, threats of cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, hybrid and illegal activities, level of integration of occupied regions into Russian Federation, activities of radical groups and provoking actions along the occupation line. Particularly, the so-called creeping occupation process is constantly in the progress. Despite unilaterally recognize the independence of occupied regions, a strategic goal of Moscow is to return Georgia to Russian political orbit. Georgia's role in the economic, trade, and transport context has significantly increased after Russia's 2022 large-scale military aggression against Ukraine. In the light of unprecedented Western sanctions imposed on Russia, there are attempts to rearrange the trade, transport, and logistics chains. The transit roads through Russia are becoming increasingly unreliable and unsafe. Therefore, the states are trying to find alternative supply routes. One of the best alternatives is the South Caucasus region and Georgia. Accordingly, and the importance of the region as an east-west transport and communication artery, as well as a transit road for Central Asia and Azerbaijan energy carriers, the alternatives to the Russian energy carriers is significantly increasing. Therefore, Georgia's role in terms of Europe's energy security is growing. Georgia's official position regarding the international restrictive measures imposed against Russia is in full compliance with the international stance. Even though Georgia has not introduced national sanctions against Russia, the government will not allow using Georgia's territory and financial system to ease the effects of undermining or avoiding the sanctions. Despite these tremendous challenges, Georgia Defense Forces still continues deepening their international cooperation and enhancing the level of their interoperability with NATO. In recent years, we made significant steps in several directions. Georgia is an inseparable part of Europe and Euro-Atlantic sphere is determined to further support and strengthen our cooperation with NATO and the EU in defense and security areas, based on common values, of course. This implies a reversible process towards integration into European and Euro-Atlantic structures, and further enhancing interoperability with our partners, which includes. So first of all, this is consistent of effective development of defense capabilities in a long term, in 10 years perspective. Ministry of Defense Vision 2030 and Defense Forces 2030 documents have been approved. These documents address the priorities and requirements of structural transformation, as well as Defense Forces combat capabilities developments. We would like to see more effective, accessible, and prompt production and supply chain of armament and, of course, equipment for partner nations. Further development of land, air, maritime, and, of course, cyber capabilities remain highly important. Development of conscription and reserve mobilization system represents one of the high priorities. Development of these systems will ensure establishment of total defense systems and will support the strengthening of national resilience. The second is the effective implementation of existing practical cooperation mechanisms with NATO. In this regard, substantial NATO-Georgia package, SNGP, plays the most important role as it was further enhanced following the adoption of tailored support to Georgia at NATO Madrid Summit. The third one is conducting multinational training exercises and active participation in international exercises. Despite the complicated security environment, Georgia hosted 5 international exercises last year, including third iteration of a NATO-Georgia exercise and exercise of Nobel partner. This year, we are planning to host exercise Agile Spirit 2023 and also actually preparing for NATO-Georgia exercise 2025. Also, Georgia readiness to contribute to international peace and stability efforts. This is the fourth one. So Georgia continues participation in NRF, and we are planning to increase our contribution from 2024. In 2022, actually, Georgia was recognized as an operational partner to the Operation Sea Guardian, with contribution since 2014, and a potential operational partner to NATO mission in Iraq. I would also like to highlight the importance of EU support with European Peace Facility Fund for Georgian Defense Forces capability development. And finally, European and Euro-Atlantic integration is strongest and most important mechanism to protect nations from the imperialistic ambitions of our northern neighbor. Last year, EU recognized the European perspective of Georgia, and we do hope to receive a status of EU candidate this year. Georgia, as a future member of Alliance, is ready to support NATO and further contribute to EU missions to provide for common security, protect our common values and goals, and strengthen regional and global security. So this includes my presentation. General PETRESCU, distinguished generals, guests, let me once again take this opportunity to express my gratitude for the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you, General Cicinnațe, for your presentation. I have one, it is my opinion, and I'm referring what General Cicinnațe mentioned about the threats against Georgia. My opinion that Russia, it's conducting a hybrid war. Maybe some of you do not agree with me. But why I'm saying that it's fomenting a very intensive hybrid war. So it's conducting a conventional war against Ukraine and a hybrid, intense hybrid war against the neighbors like Georgia and Republic of Moldova, and also against NATO and EU states. So I think we are already at war and we have to be prepared. With these comments, I would like to give the floor to the audience for the Q&A sessions. What I would like to ask you is to introduce yourself, to present also from your appartenance of the organization. Sir.
Thank you for your, generals, thank you for your presentations. I appreciate a lot what you said. All of you mentioned before how critical importance is trust, will, and public support. And what General DINU mentioned, we are targeted by a hybrid war. It's a full-scale war against Ukraine, in Ukraine, and a full-scale hybrid war targeting will, support, and trust in our societies. And my question is for you, if you have plans to counter this hybrid war, otherwise we will fail to win the battle for the minds of hearts of our own citizens, and unfortunately we'll lose the war for our values. Thank you.
So,
I'm Ionionitsa, editor-in-chief of Romanian History magazine.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I would start saying that the first condition to win this battle of narratives and to win against this hybrid war is to recognize that this is happening. And also to monitor what is going on and to educate the society. And Karel mentioned, and I could not agree more, how important is the popular support. I was thinking when you were talking, if we were surprised by what was happening and what is going on in the Black Sea, and if we had in our national security documents this type of mention. And you may be aware that in the last National Defense Strategy we released, and also in the military strategy, few years before the conflict happened, we mentioned Russia as a threat, and we said the Russian buildup of forces in the Black Sea constitute a threat to our national security. So somehow we were prepared regarding that. We also mentioned the hybrid action that are going on not only against Romania, but also against our partner nation like Republic of Moldova, Georgia, against Ukraine at that time, and illegal annexation of Crimea. It's important to educate. And we also noticed when the conflict started the impact on the perception of the population. It was full support for Ukraine, and everybody recognized that we cannot admit this type of conflict to happen in Europe in 21st century. But on the other hand, it was also a worry I felt in the whole of society. And we've noticed about this worry when we had to conduct mobilization exercises, routine exercises we normally did every year. Because of COVID, we had to cancel some of them. And after that, because of the sensitivities related to the war, and also because of the propaganda, you may recall all the fake news that we are mobilizing, we are preparing for war. Yeah, we are preparing the normal activities, and we have to continue to conduct these normal activities. And we also need support in order to adapt our laws, preparing the population for defense, preparing the territory for defense. These are important laws. We need to have them adapted to the new realities. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Thank you. It's an excellent question. It gets asked a lot. Maybe I'll give the short answer and try a little longer. The short answer is we do not have the posture and readiness that we know we need to be able to counter hybrid threats. But what's important is it's recognized as an alliance, it's recognized by the EU, and it's recognized by individual nations. Some nations are stronger in various aspects of it, but if you'll allow an open definition of hybrid warfare to include a couple of domains, if you consider cyber, as you well understand, there are sovereign obligations and responsibilities that would prevent a collective approach, which means that there's a bit of imagination. It's not a prevention of creating deterrence or attribution or defense in that domain. It just makes it a little more complicated. In terms of the wider information environment, if you accept recognizing there's many interpretations of hybrid war or next generation war, but the information environment is also an area where we know it's contested, where manipulation is occurring, where we want to get ahead of the narrative with truth and understand the attribution. I mentioned one of the 4 battles that we need to get stronger at, certainly across the alliance. The information environment is it. Right now, across many of the joint commands, we're trying better to understand what's playing out, how narratives are being applied, using technology and AI to convey or understand the truth when manipulation happens. We're a long way from where we need to be. A final dimension to hybrid war, maybe we should look at it respecting some of the comments just made by our Iraq colleague from Georgia. Iraq, I think your first name is. There are partners that, as was just expressed, that are vulnerable, that are susceptible to influence from Russia. Georgia has just, in their own words, have said so. We've heard from the Chad of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And it's not that there are, there's predatory lending by some countries, such as China, but the vulnerability extends to Russia, and it's an extension of their approach to hybrid war to distract partners and allies from what's happening in one location, consuming resources, focus, and interest. So it is pervasive. We don't have the posture we want, but it is an open conversation, and we will see momentum on it across the alliance.
Thank you, sir.
Can I also add?
Yeah, please, sir.
Yeah, sorry, just to correct myself, on this, we also had a mention of Russia in the national defense strategy, but not in the national security strategy. Obviously, it was there, the content, but they tried to avoid naming too directly. So we were kind of careful about, naming Russia directly, and that changed. On this hybrid, well, what is it hybrid? In my view, hybrid is kind of someone looking throughout the whole spectrum of the whole society, looking for vulnerabilities, and then using them and pushing on them in synergy and to achieve some objectives. And it may be informational, economy, whatever. And I think the biggest problem of hybrid is to get coordinated. If you are well coordinated, you're done basically. But it's very, very difficult. So there may be little things happening in different areas, and it's very difficult to put it all together to discover, what's happening, and then have some coordinated reaction. I was a director of National Cyber and Information Security Agency, so I know just cooperation in cyber with different agencies, criminal, intelligence, whatever, military, civilian, how difficult it sometimes is, and there are other aspects, supply chains, and things like that. So I think hybrid is all about coordination. on this information round, like disinformation, and we actually have, we approved, I think, a year ago, a national strategy how to cope with this hybrid influence, and we have an action plan, and so on. Where I see our weaknesses, at least back at home, is in strategic communication. And I think sometimes I don't think we shouldn't put enough attention to disinformation, but sometimes we are too obsessed with this disinformation and we don't focus enough on our own communication. Because if you want to defeat the bad narrative, the best way is to have the better narrative and be able to communicate it better. And usually they just use our weaknesses and holes and problems. So if we focus on sorting out those problems and weaknesses and have better communication, then we should be pretty much safe. And that's very difficult. I also kind of start hating the expression strategic communication because everyone is using it without any common understanding. And sometimes it is used in a way that we do something and then we try to explain what we did. But that's not strategic communication. Strategic communication is a part of strategy. It's creating and drafting and planning what we will do and how we react and what we do in line or in coordination with what we want to achieve, basically. So it should be a part of strategy. So before I do something, I also consider what impact it will have in this, not only in physical space, but also in the information space. And I think if we do this well, we shouldn't worry too much about this disinformation. And we're not great in it. And also, we don't communicate only by words. We usually communicate stronger by what we do, by deeds. And this needs to be in line. And the worst thing is if the words don't match the deeds. And that happens sometimes. So if we avoid this, and if we communicate clearly, and if we have better and more attractive and truthful narratives, then we shouldn't worry about the disinformation.
Great answer, sir. Thank you very much. Irakli, if you have something more to comment on this.
Very shortly, actually. It was everything correctly mentioned that in countries like Georgia and Eastern Europe, and not only actually, even in the United States, hybrid warfare from Russia is getting increased. And what we are doing to prevent this warfare from our side, actually, there are several projects, programs that we are having. Yes, I'm speaking now as a defense forces. And one of the most effective tools that we have created, this is, as it was mentioned by General PETRESCU, education of population. And doing this, so we are having some agreements with civilian institutions and universities, and we are sending our officers actually there to meet students, young generation, and speak about risks, challenges, threats, about disinformation, about hybrid warfare, and from the other hand, also we are speaking about what Georgian Defense Forces is doing, what the expectation should be from population towards the Georgian Defense Forces, and what are those actually programs, projects that we execute and implement to increase our defensive capabilities, and we realize that it really helps. Also, we are having several volunteer organizations in the country, young or youth organizations actually, who are working with Georgian Defense Forces very closely. So we have memorandums. So we provide them trainings, we provide them some briefings, presentations, again, on the same topics. And these organizations are full with young people, boys and girls, and actually our new generation. And they are very curious to find out what's happening in reality. And while providing this from the first hand, this information and understandings, it really helps rather to send some, let's say, to do some information in TVs or channels, because young generations, they're not watching news and TV, so they really have different mindsets, and they are really kind of engaged when they see this from first source. And I think it helps. It helps, and we are working on this to even improve and develop this concept and project and to go widely. So this is just my recommendations as a one mechanism to prevent hybrid warfare and, of course, disinformation from our adversaries. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, in my opinion, hybrid war, the main target of the hybrid war that Russia is conducting, it's against the resilience of the state. Resilience, including the trust in the armed forces. They are doing information operations to diminish the capabilities and capacities of including NATO armies. And we've seen recently what happened in Ukraine with Patriot system hit by caliber missiles and so on and so forth. We didn't react right away. So we have a delay in communication. We do not have the same. So I mean, in the hybrid warfare, you need to have the necessary instruments. Even though we are in uniform, we have to be prepared to fight a different war. Very good question, sir. Now I give the floor to General Hormuz.
Thank you very much. I just want to take advantage of General KELSEY being here. And, sir, is there any conversation in JFC Naples about how to complement the lack of NATO naval capabilities in the Black Sea? You know that since the invasion started, the Montreux Convention was applied. That was a big advantage for Ukraine because the Russians were not able to bring more assets. That's a good thing. But also, we are not able to bring NATO assets here. And is there any conversation in Naples? And I'm also taking advantage of having the future Deputy Secretary here. How can we complement? How can we do something to deal with this issue? Of course, I'm not talking about the convention. The convention is there, and everyone is, we have to protect the Montreux Convention. No conversation about that. That's one point. The second point, do we need to do more in order to add value to the Danube from the defense military point of view? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question, sir. As you would expect, I will carefully avoid the policy sensitivity of the question that you asked and just simply offer a military perspective. And that military perspective is grounded in an understanding of where we know competition is occurring. And in the maritime domain, we know it occurs in the Eastern Med, and it will occur in the Black Sea, just like in the air domain. And so part of our design for vigilance activities, part of our design for the future plans, must undertake a means to confront by choice where we need it to be. The specifics of your question is more about when. And what I would say is, a return, a greater return to the Black Sea region is less a question of if, but the conditions around how. The nations will need to decide, specifically the littoral nations, Turkey, you alluded to the Montreux Convention. The best insight that I heard offered, and I'm just looking to see if he's in the room, but the best way to return to the Black Sea is actually to defeat Russia in Ukraine and then return to norms. The conversation does happen, that I'm aware. It happens in the maritime domain consistently, and it's not about, again, it's about figuring out the right conditions, and it certainly happens bilaterally. Just like most of our actions with Ukraine, our support of Ukraine, is bilaterally, and that's another means of pursuing an aim, an end through a different means. As far as the Danube question, I defer to my distinguished panel mate, General PETRESCU, for that one.
Yeah, thank you. I will answer that, but I want to talk about Black Sea first. Yeah, indeed, the situation is what it is right now. But first, the Black Sea is considered an area of strategic importance, and this is recognized by the NATO strategic concept. Second, you don't tackle the issues only by naval presence, and the approach against a threat in a certain area should be multi-domain. So right now, if at sea only the riverine countries' navies are present, we also have an ISR present all the time over the Black Sea. We also have a good air presence in Romania. We do enhanced vigilance activity, enhanced air policing. Right now we have Italian and Spanish contingent, Air Force contingent present here. And we also act in other domains that can complement for the lack of naval presence for the time being. Regarding Danube, we just discussed at the conference of the CHODs in the Balkan countries. We discussed about military mobility. We had presentations from the EU also. EU is recognizing, the Balkan CHODs are recognizing the importance of Danube as part of military mobility corridors in Europe. And we're trying to work harder in that area. We have a riverine flotilla which is pretty capable at this moment and providing security on the Danube month and also along the Danube. It's among our priorities. But coming back to the Black Sea, we also need to take into account what we are doing to develop our own capabilities. Of course, for the time being, we have been stuck in some contracts that didn't work, and we are behind with where we should be regarding our naval capabilities, but we have a signed agreement and contract for naval strike missiles, which in my opinion would be a game changer. We just got approval from the parliament to start programs for getting for the Romanian Naval Forces submarines, 2 mine hunters, which with the danger of mines right now floating in the drifting mines in the Black Sea, I think it's a good step forward. The Marine Regiment, we are paying attention, and as I mentioned, the riverine flotilla. 2 helicopters with anti-surface capabilities from the naval forces. So there are putting naval strike missiles on the smaller ships that can launch missile, modernizing the frigates. These are things we try to do, we try to accelerate this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions for... Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm Colonel retired Mihai Știr with the New Strategy Center. I have a very short and direct questions related to what has just been said about the whole of society response to the conflict, future conflict, a potential future conflict with Russia, and taking some ideas from the panels we passed to the last 2 days. My question is, can we somehow train the whole of society response to Russia, and can organization like, let's say, New Strategy Center support such kind of process? Thank you.
Thank you, John ŘEHKA. I mean, the involvement of NGOs in whole of society resilience and support.
Actually, I think it is important. Like in our own country, we have civilian think tanks who are working on some of the issues. And to be honest, for example, in disinformation area and Stratcom area, probably the most of the work was done by NGO, actually, who are closely also linked to some of the state organizations. So for building the know-how, doing the studies, it's okay. But as a military guy, I think what you need to do is exercise, exercise, exercise. So unless you start realistically exercising, you don't know what you don't know. So, and then it's hard to prepare. So I think it is really important to exercise. How many times you really exercise with actually decision makers, with a real government, real ministers, for example. How many times you call the, crisis, we call it center crisis staff or whatever, which is like the bunch of guys from all the ministries and agencies doing stuff together. Very, very few times. We actually did it this year for like first time in history ever. But so basically, I think unless you start wargaming and exercising, that's probably the best way. And actually, even the NGOs or think tanks can do this, and sometimes they are in the better position because they can be more open. Maybe they cannot work with realistic data in all this because some of that is classified, but it doesn't matter. Normally, you are pretty accurate anyway, and you have less restrictions. You have more time, and you usually then compared to these state bodies, because they're usually overloaded with something else, and also you can bring a good knowledge and experience, because you may bring retired people, experienced people, people who remember days which we don't remember so well, and so on.
May I add? I think everything can be educated, but in terms of whole of society approach, it needs to be organized first, and after that educated. As one step we do towards organizing is the interinstitutional work we have, getting everybody on board, all the state institutions, all the stakeholders, and trying to work together. I think we have a good experience after the COVID pandemic, and we can, continue on that path, but we need to organize this in laws, and this is why I said, what about a new law or an updated law regarding the preparation of the population for defense, or updating the national defense law, or updating the regulations regarding the status of the military, and so on.
Thank you very, very much for your comments and for your answers. Any other questions? I have 3 minutes left. If not, I have, yes, ma'am, or miss.
Hello, my name is Roberta Reducu. I have a PhD in communication and I'm with the New Strategy Center. I wanted to ask you, because I see the worry about the hybrid threat, and I see that you managed to tackle extremely well the physical part, but what about the hybrid part, the informational part? Would the armies be willing to have this component within them? The component where you join forces with communication experts? Thank you.
Thank you. Very good question.
Well, we actually have them, and we're building them, but we, at least in my country, and you may have different approaches, depends on whatever suits the various states or societies, but we focus on. So we do we analyze the information environment regularly, we watch the social media networks, whatever, we do all that. We build some capabilities, both active and reserves. We built this forces, the cyber and information operations forces who work on that. But from the military point, I'm interested in what impact it has on the combat readiness of my force on the military side. So we focus on the military side. Then we have different organization in Ministry of Interior and in other agencies. So yes, there may be different models. I believe, and there's different arguments. We had those arguments some years ago. And some people said, okay, well, we think the military should take a lead, or not even military, but the defense sector, because if the hybrid, if it graduates and graduates and graduates, and the crisis escalates, at the worst situation in the end, the defense will have to take over, because it will graduate to the conflict. On the other side, most of the time, 90% of the time, it's not military or defense. It's internal. So it's more MOI and internal security. So I don't know, you know. So we build in Czech Republic, we build in this capability, but we focus on the defense, combat readiness of the force, and support to military operations. And the civilian society is covered by other agencies.
Right, I totally agree with you. It's an interinstitutional effort, and to tackle the hybrid means all the institutions of the state to be involved in one single plan. The question I would like to add more is, do we have, actually, did we put in our plans these hybrid threats in our exercises, so did we bring the interinstitutional teams in order to tackle the hybrid war? So we've seen what happened in Ukraine. They started with hybrid, and after that they want conventional. So I think we have to think a little bit regarding this.
I think it's an excellent question. Past experience in the force design world, this is the nature of what you've asked. And most force development, force design machinery is around heavy steel, platforms, defining requirements in terms of tangible things. And what you're suggesting is what I have seen with many nations. It's about competency. And how do you aggregate the competency to address the challenge? NATO as an organization, and specifically the NDPP process, if you know that acronym, we love our acronyms. It's not tooled to look after competencies in that sense. Intelligence, yes. We're getting closer with open source intelligence, but this is a very specific skill set. I think it's worth thinking about, and thank you for asking the question.
Thank you very much, distinguished speakers. We had the opportunity to hear from you valuable ideas. And at the end of our discussions, I would like to thank personally, and in the name of the entire New Strategy Center team, the distinguished speakers for their special thoughts and the message conveyed to the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, let's thank our distinguished panelists with our warm applause.